Hard to capture, extravagant, resurrect the track and it's militant. And I react like a convict and start killing. It's manifested. The gods work like appliances, dealing in my sacred.
Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explained here, and today I want to talk to you guys about something that I've been seeing a lot in the last couple of weeks, which is a lot of people have looked at the possibility of Boruto getting a new rasengan and Boruto adding yet another change in chakra nature to one of his rasengans. They've said Boruto Uzumaki is getting too strong too fast, and they're saying that Sarada the same thing. Even though she's training with Sasuke and she's being shown with weaknesses, people are still saying that Sarada is progressing way too fast, and I want to go ahead and address that. I've kind of talked about this a couple of times in the past, but I'm gonna take this from a different angle because I have to keep in mind that, you know, some of the people who watch the channel are newer fans, and I know from private conversations I've had with quite a few of you guys that, you know, some of you guys, you just watch the main fight clips on YouTube, or you play the Storm games and you say hop, caught up, and you started the Boruto series, or in some cases you just started with the Boruto anime. So I want to go ahead and address this notion that Boruto's getting too quick too fast and kind of parlay that over to Sarada. So here's the thing about that, right? So let's start with this newest development. Boruto is adding a wind change in chakra nature to the Rasengan, and people are saying, my god, when is Boruto gonna use a new jutsu? Why is it some type of a Rasengan variation? And so I would kind of push back on that, and I would say two things. Number one, Naruto is a series that is about passing down your will of fire to the next generation. Part of passing down your will of fire to the next generation is passing down the ninjutsu that you've learned to the next generation. That's always been the trope of the series. Even in part one of Naruto, those jutsu that Choji and Shino and the rest of them are using were jutsu that were taught to them by their parents. Naruto's Rasengan was created by Minato. Minato passed that jutsu on to his master Jiraiya. If you take in the, I believe, Naruto Shippuden movie 4, Jiraiya learned it on his own, but still remains, that's a jutsu that was eventually passed down to Naruto. Naruto passed it on to Konohamaru. Konohamaru passed it on to Boruto. That's how this series goes. You don't have a bunch of characters making their own individual jutsu. Even Darui, a few other the jutsu that he's fighting with, those are jutsu that are passed down to him by the third Hokage. That's how the trope goes. Even with Kakashi with the chidori, that's his own personal jutsu that he created, but that's an exception. That's an exception to the rule. The same thing like Tobirama with the Flying Thunder God, that is an exception to the rule. Minato inherited that jutsu by learning it, and then Minato added brand new jutsu to it, the same way that Naruto added brand new jutsu to the Rasengan using different variations, the same way that Boruto created a brand new Rasengan by adding lightning release by creating that vanishing rasengan. That's all stuff that we've seen that's in line with the actual series itself. That's not something to be upset over, in my opinion. Again, people like Kakashi and Minato and Tobirama who are making their own individual jutsu, that's not an abundance in the series. You have characters in the series that are an exception, but I would venture to say a majority of the characters that you see fighting in the Naruto franchise are using jutsu that were passed down to them. So I think that that bit right there is a bit overblown, whether it be the fact that he uses Rasengan or the fact that he's adding a wind change in chakra nature to it. What I found funniest about this whole thing was the fact that Boruto said, yeah, this is that new Rasengan, it's mine, I'm going to call it the wind style Rasengan. And I got a bunch of comments saying, well, if you add wind release to it, isn't that the Rasen Shuriken? And I said, no, Naruto has two wind style Rasengans. He has the wind style Rasengan, and then he has the wind style Rasen Shuriken. He has two different variations of it. All Boruto did was create a new version of it, but even when you look at Boruto's, there's a difference. Naruto's wind style Rasengan has little miniature chakra blades floating around it. Boruto's wind style Rasengan, number one, it's green in color, and then two, it's got rings floating around it, so it doesn't have the chakra razors that come from like the wind chakra circulating. So even then, that's a different variation to it. Like I'm completely okay with that. I think that that's 100% in character for this type of a series. Now when it comes to the second thing, I see a lot of people saying, man, like Boruto's just getting all these chakra natures too quickly. I don't understand understand how you can do it. You know, I've had people message me saying, hey man, you know, in the Naruto series, you know, people just giving the natures, it isn't a big deal. No, it low-key is a big deal, but at the same time it's being overblown. So I talked about this in the review just a little bit. You know, the fact of the matter is that, you know, when you get into the series, they tell you like, hey, you know, you have people, they have a main chakra affinity, they have a chakra release that they are naturally inclined to be able to pick up. So for Naruto, it's wind release. When Boruto Uzumaki was first introduced, Boruto, it was wind release in the Boruto movie novelization, and in the anime they kind of gone back and forth with it, but the fact is that he had an affinity for wind release. And when you look at the actual anime, the very first jutsu, the first elemental jutsu we see him using is actually wind release. And in particular, what's so crazy about that is the fact that, you know, we actually see that, you know, Boruto tells Anko and he tells Iruka like, hey, I've been practicing on my own to try and figure out how to actually use wind release, and I think I'm starting to get really good at it. The fact that he's picking up on it that quickly over what's a miniature time skip that's in that arc, because the academy school, if I'm not mistaken, the academy school had just finished being rebuilt at that point. A school typically takes between 12 to 24 months to get rebuilt. Boruto spent that time after the whole debacle with Sumire, where he saw Mitsuki use wind release. He took that time to practice using wind release. Now, why is that so important? Well, we know from the Naruto manga that just the process of figuring out how to actually summon wind chakra and be able to cut the leaves and everything, that takes at a minimum 6 months to be able to do. Most ninja do it in 6 months. Kakashi says in most cases it takes people several years to get a change in chakra nature, and yet we've seen it with Sasuke. Sasuke picks up on lightning change in chakra nature in a few days after already having fire release as his basic chakra nature. And then when you add in the change in chakra form in order to get to the chidori, that took Sasuke longer. That took Sasuke almost a month to master, but just the change in chakra nature took Sasuke a few days. Boruto, we know at least wind release, that took him a significant amount of time to be able to pick up. Now, the other thing about chakra nature that a lot of people overlook is the fact that Kakashi says like, hey, you know, when people become Jonin, they typically are able to use at a minimum 2 changes in chakra nature, but we know from what Shikamaru says. Shikamaru says that, hey, adding a change in chakra nature is not very easy. Most people struggle with it, and most importantly, he says, and this is very important, he says, you have to be extremely sharp to pick up the change in chakra nature. That's the whole reason why they have drills through it. What I find fascinating about it is the fact that with Boruto, we're seeing what would essentially be somebody like Minato if Minato was a child and we had a series about him. We're seeing somebody who, once he figures something out, he finds the fastest way to get something done. That's why his lightning release is not very proficient. That's why Sasuke called him out on it. The other thing is that when he uses the Boruto stream, that's wind release. That's wind release. When he tried using lightning release in the Hidden Mist Field Trip arc, that itty bitty lightning release that he shot out when he was fighting against the dude that looks like he's Kisame's son, his name escapes me at the time, but when Boruto used that, he basically shrugged it off. But the thing about adding those different chakra natures is your main chakra nature is always going to be your strongest. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. So obviously, if you're somebody who has the sharingan, you can copy ninjutsu. That's how Sarada Uchiha was able to add in different changes in chakra natures as time went on. That's why in the Sasuke Shinden novel, you can argue that's why she has wind release. That's why Sarada was able to pick up lightning release in the Hidden Mist Field Trip arc. I mean, that's something that makes sense right there. That makes sense for sharingan to be able to use that. But the other side is if you have Rinnegan, and this is where people like Sasuke and Nagato are just extreme prodigies, is the Rinnegan opens up the door to damn near every jutsu that's not Kekkei Genkai based. And even with Sasuke's getting to the point where he's starting to break down how the Kekkei Genkai are working, and he's experimenting. I did a whole video talking about Sasuke's ice release. But the fact on all this is that I'm okay with Boruto adding in these different chakra natures. Now, I think that it would be cool if we saw Boruto like how we saw with Kakashi, where he's going through a little bit of extra training. We see him work harder for it. I think if we saw something like that, a lot of people would not be upset over. I think a lot of people would be more accepting. You don't see everybody in this new generation whipping out elemental ninjutsu. It kind of goes back to what Kakashi said when he saw Sasuke in the bell test. He said genin should not be able to use this. Now, obviously, if you've been genin for a long time, then yes, you're going to pick up a chakra nature. But for the most part, most genin using elemental attacks, that's not something you're used to seeing. And the ones that can, those are people that should be head and shoulders above everybody else. You don't see these new generation people using it. You see Shikadai use a change in chakra nature, but for the most part, everybody else outside of Team 7, they're progressing like normal genin. And the common theme that you should be seeing is the fact that Shikadai is a genius. Shikadai is a prodigy. Iwabe in the Academy arc was stated to be a combat specialist that was more talented, head and shoulders above everybody else. Boruto, Sarada, Mitsuki, they're all prodigies. That all makes sense for them to kind of move at this rate. However, I want to know from you guys, I really want to know from you guys, why do you guys feel that Boruto, Sarada, Mitsuki, why do you think that they're progressing too quickly? And what would you like to see in order to fix that? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.